Gabriel Harlow, a former Marine who disappeared into the quiet edges of Flagstaff's pine forests to escape the echoes of war, thought he had finally outrun the past. But on one sweltering summer night, while crossing a creaking wooden bridge after a sudden storm, he stopped cold. Below the ravine, a police cruiser lay overturned in the muddy water, lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. Officer Dylan Reese and his canine partner, Atlas, were trapped. Dylan barely conscious, blood trailing down his temple, and Atlas whimpering, fighting to stand on an injured leg. Beside them, half buried in the dirt, a torn scrap of plastic flapped in the wind with 4 chilling words scratched across it. "You should have stayed silent." Who had hunted them? Why leave them broken in the dark, like ghosts meant to disappear? And how much danger was racing toward them? Even now, what happened next will break your heart and restore your faith in the light that finds us even in the deepest night. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from tonight. Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. A summer thunderstorm rolled over the pines of northern Arizona, turning the forested edge of Flagstaff into a maze of flickering shadows and wet earth. Gabriel Harlow moved through the rain with the deliberate calm of a man who had learned long ago to survive chaos. At 48, Gabriel carried a frame hardened by years in the Marine Corps, broad shoulders, weather-creased skin, dark stubble cut just short of a beard, and eyes the shade of iron that had seen too much loss to ever fully relax. His hair, shot with early gray, clung to his temples under the hood of his jacket. For a decade now, he had lived alone near the Coconino National Forest, not because he hated people, but because he no longer trusted himself to be part of the world after the decisions he had made overseas. Solitude made sense. Solitude didn't judge. Solitude didn't bleed. But tonight, something in the storm felt different. The rain hammered the wooden bridge ahead like drumming fists, and the trees groaned under the wind. As Gabriel approached the crossing, a faint strobe flickered down in the ravine, a blue-white pulse too rhythmic to be lightning. His instincts tightened. Police lights, trouble, and trouble meant someone who might still be alive. Gabriel moved down the muddy slope with practiced precision, boots digging into softened soil. The smell of wet earth rose sharply. When he reached the bottom, he saw the overturned patrol car, half submerged in the runoff, windshield cracked like a spiderweb. The vehicle's red-blue lights blinked weakly beneath the sheets of rain, dying with each second, and slumped against the crushed doorframe was a man. Officer Dylan Reese, though Gabriel didn't know his name yet, looked impossibly young to be bleeding alone in a ravine. 34 at most. He had an angular jaw half hidden beneath streaks of mud and blood, short, dark blonde hair plastered to his scalp, and the unmistakable fatigue of a man who had spent too many nights chasing the worst humanity had to offer. His uniform, Flagstaff PD, was torn at the shoulder, soaked through, and one of his hands twitched reflexively, as if still trying to reach for something he had dropped. Beside him was a dog, a German shepherd, 6 years old, judging from the slight silvering around the muzzle. The name on the broken canine harness read Atlas. The dog's sable and black coat was matted with mud, and his hind leg bent stiffly, a clear sign of injury. Despite that, Atlas braced himself over Dylan's chest with fierce loyalty, pressing his forehead gently against the officer's cheek as if urging him to wake. When Gabriel took a step forward, Atlas whipped his head toward him, lips curled, a deep warning growl rolling from his throat. Even injured, the dog radiated a protective fury, the kind bred from years of working side by side with a partner he trusted more than the world. Gabriel raised his hands slowly. "Easy, boy," he murmured, voice deep, steady, the way he once spoke to frightened soldiers. "I'm here to help." Atlas hesitated, torn between suspicion and the desperate need to keep Dylan alive. The dog's breathing was ragged, but his resolve didn't falter. Gabriel crouched, avoiding sudden movements, and checked the officer's pulse. Faint, but there. Dylan's face was pale, almost gray, but the tension around his jaw suggested he hadn't given up before losing consciousness. A fighter, then. Someone who pushed past fear until the body finally quit. Gabriel knew that kind too well. Using his flashlight and a length of rope from his pack, he pried the crushed door enough to drag Dylan out. The officer groaned once, head lolling against Gabriel's shoulder. Atlas instantly tried to stand, slipping in the mud but refusing to stay down. When Gabriel turned to pick him up, the dog limped stubbornly to Dylan's side, pressing himself under the officer's dangling hand, nudging it as if demanding to stay connected. "All right," Gabriel muttered, tightening his grip around Dylan. "You're both coming." The climb back up was brutal. Rain stung their faces like thrown pebbles. Mud sucked at Gabriel's boots. Atlas, panting through pain, climbed in fits and starts, using only one good hind leg while keeping the other tucked close. But he didn't fall behind, not once. When they reached the road, a violent crack split the air. Lightning struck a utility pole nearby, sparks bursting like molten stars. A live wire snapped loose, thrashing across the pavement. Gabriel froze, but Atlas didn't. The dog barked sharply, yanking on the rope Gabriel had looped around his harness, pulling him backward with surprising strength. Gabriel pivoted just in time, shielding Dylan from the falling wire. The metal hissed against the wet ground, electricity burning a jagged path where they had stood seconds earlier. Gabriel looked down at the trembling dog. Atlas met his eyes with an intelligent, unyielding focus, as if to say he wasn't done yet, not while his handlers still breathed. And in that moment, Gabriel understood. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of something he hadn't expected: responsibility, connection, maybe even redemption. But first, he had to get them both somewhere safe before the storm erased their footprints forever. Gabriel's cabin sat low beneath the pines, the storm fading into a steady rhythm against the tin roof as he pushed the door open with Dylan's weight slumped against his shoulder. The warm scent of old coffee and pine wood drifted through the dim room, softening the sharp chill still clinging to their clothes. He laid Dylan on the sagging brown sofa, the leather cracked from years of weather and quiet, and stepped back only long enough to catch his breath. Under the lamplight, the officer's injuries looked even worse. Blood dried into his hairline, bruises swelling along his ribs, breaths shallow and uneven. Atlas limped inside behind them, dragging his injured hind leg but refusing any help, as if pride mattered more than pain. The 6-year-old German shepherd's sable black coat clung to his body in soaked clumps, and yet his eyes held that same fierce intelligence as in the ravine. As soon as Gabriel released Dylan's hand, Atlas pulled himself across the wooden floor and rested his head on his handler's chest, trembling with every movement but refusing to lie anywhere else. Each soft groan from Dylan made the dog push closer, as if trying to absorb the man's pain into his own battered body. Gabriel crouched beside them, wiping mud from Atlas's flank. "You're not quitting on him, are you?" he murmured. Atlas lifted his eyes, full of pain and determination, but said nothing, because he didn't need to. Then footsteps crunched outside through the thinning rain. Gabriel straightened, instincts razor sharp, muscles shifting toward defense before thought caught up. A knock rang out, sharp, urgent, but not hostile. "Gabriel, it's Maya. Are you in there?" He exhaled and unlatched the door. Maya Brooks, 29, stood on the porch with a burst of cold night air swirling around her. Her yellow raincoat dripped water onto the threshold, her long, dark brown braid plastered over one shoulder, freckles bright against light tan skin flushed from the hike through the storm. Maya carried a canvas veterinary bag nearly as large as her torso, and her hazel eyes widened instantly at the sight inside the cabin. She stepped in before Gabriel even spoke. The moment her gaze landed on Dylan and Atlas, her posture shifted, soft concern sharpening into focused urgency. "Knew something was wrong when your porch light stayed on in that weather," she said. "Radio's dead. Good thing I checked. She knelt beside Dylan, brushing wet hair from his forehead, and checked his pupils with a penlight. Concussion, she murmured, and likely cracked ribs. Then she turned to Atlas, assessing the bent hind leg, the scraped pads, the deep exhaustion in the dog's breathing. You poor thing, she whispered. But when Maya leaned over Dylan again, Atlas surged upward in a flash of protective instinct. The dog planted himself between her and his unconscious handler, ears rigid, teeth bared in a trembling growl. Maya froze, hands raised, eyes wide, but not with fear, with respect. Gabriel moved forward and rested a calming hand on Atlas's neck. She's a friend, he said softly. Atlas hesitated, chest heaving, then sank slowly back to the floor, though his gaze never left Maya's every movement. Maya gave a small, breathless laugh. He's protective, amazingly protective. He saved Dylan's life out there, Gabriel replied, and he's not done. With Gabriel nearby, Atlas finally allowed Maya to clean the wound, apply antiseptic, and give him a mild pain injection. The dog trembled once, whimpered softly, and then collapsed beside Dylan with a sigh that sounded too old for his 6 years. Moments later, Dylan stirred, his eyelids fluttered open, pupils glassy and unfocused, and he tried to push himself up before pain forced him back. My phone, he rasped. Where's my phone? Gabriel leaned closer. You need rest, not my phone, Dylan repeated, voice raw with panic. They wanted the data. He swallowed hard, throat bobbing. Desert vultures. Maya's head snapped up. The cartel on the I-40 route? Dylan nodded weakly. They forced my car off the road. They wanted access to everything. Routes, seizures, contacts. His breathing hitched. There's a leak inside Flagstaff PD. Someone feeding them intel. Gabriel felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not the storm cold. Something older, heavier, the feeling he used to get right before ambushes in countries far from home. Maya sat back on her heels, processing every word. Do you know who? She asked. Dylan shook his head. Not yet, but they knew where I'd be tonight. They knew exactly when to hit me. Atlas pressed his nose against Dylan's cheek, whining softly, sensing the rise of fear beneath his voice. Gabriel breathed out slowly, the weight of the moment pressing into his spine, like an echo from a life he tried so hard to leave behind. He stood, walked to the window, and peered into the dark tree line. Rain whispered through the branches, but something else stirred too, just faint enough to feel without hearing. Behind him, Atlas lifted his head, ears pricked toward the same darkness outside the window. His gaze sharpened, his body tensed, and Gabriel realized, in the stillness between thunder and breath, that the storm that mattered most was no longer the one in the sky. It was the one heading straight toward them. Morning light crept slowly across the high desert, spreading a pale wash of blue over the red plateau stretching beyond Flagstaff. The storm had passed, leaving the earth damp, the scent of juniper sharp in the crisp air. Gabriel walked ahead with a steady gait, his boots sinking slightly into the softened soil. Behind him, Dylan moved carefully, one arm pressed to his ribs, trying not to show how much each step hurt. Even injured, he refused to stay behind. It wasn't stubbornness, it was guilt, and a fear that stopping meant letting the desert vultures slip further into the shadows. Atlas limped beside them, his freshly bandaged hind legs stiff but functional. The 6-year-old German shepherd kept his head low, nose sweeping the ground in slow arcs, occasionally pausing to test a scent. His ears flicked at every sound. Birds, distant trucks, the soft crunch of Maya's steps behind them. Despite the pain in each stride, he walked with purpose, as if the land itself held answers he was determined to uncover for Dylan's sake. Dylan paused at the edge of the clearing and stared down toward the ravine where his patrol car had been smashed the night before. His face tightened. The morning light revealed a weariness deeper then physical injury, eyes shadowed by the memory of headlights coming from nowhere, the screech of metal, the sickening drop. He swallowed once, jaw shifting. They knew exactly where I'd be, he muttered. Had to be someone feeding them my route. Gabriel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Dylan's suspicion made too much sense. Maya climbed the last bit of slope and joined them, breaths misting in the cold air. Her hair was tied back in a messy braid, her cheeks flushed from the hike. She unfolded a laminated forest map she had carried since dawn. I marked the spots I've been monitoring, she said, tapping the map with a gloved finger. White box trucks, no logos. They go in here. She pointed toward a cluster of abandoned lumber buildings near Winslow. And come back out at night, always heavy on the return trip, always avoiding highways. Gabriel studied the map, then the long skid marks carved into the dirt road. The grooves were deep, angled sharply toward the ravine. That wasn't an accident, he said. They forced you off. Dylan nodded. Pickup truck, big one, came out of the trees before I saw it. He knelt slowly and pressed his palm against the scraped dirt. This is where it hit me. Atlas let out a low rumble as his nose pressed to a patch of mud nearby. His posture stiffened, tail rising. Gabriel approached. What do you smell, boy? Atlas stepped forward, sniffing harder, then pawed at the base of a twisted juniper root. Mud loosened. A glint of black appeared beneath the soil. Gabriel crouched and dug out a small object, a compact body camera, scratched heavily along the edges, probably ripped from Dylan's vest during the crash. Dylan's breath caught. That's mine, he whispered. His fingers trembled as he took the damaged device. If the memory survived, it might show their truck, faces, plates, something. Maya's expression brightened with a spark of hope. I can try to salvage it. I've restored trail cams in worse condition. Gabriel nodded. We'll check it back at the cabin. Atlas continued searching, padding along the road's edge. He stopped again, lowering his head to a flattened patch of grass. A faint chemical odor drifted up, biting, sharp. Gabriel touched the soil and brought his fingers close to his nose. The smell was unmistakable. Dylan's voice darkened. Cutting compound, same stuff they used in that fentanyl bust last month. He glanced toward the road. They were moving product last night. Maya unfolded her notes again. If my sightings match your timeline, they must be using the Winslow storage site as a relay point. It's far enough from law enforcement and close enough to the forest roads for quick escapes. Atlas stiffened suddenly, head swiveling toward the east. His ears stood tall. His entire body snapped into alertness. Gabriel's senses sharpened instantly. What is it? Atlas stepped several paces onto the open red soil, nose testing the breeze. The dog's muscles tensed, not fear but recognition. Dylan took a painful step forward. Is someone out there, boy? Atlas growled, the low warning sound vibrating through the morning stillness. Gabriel scanned the horizon, but the plateau was empty. Quiet, except for wind brushing against sparse desert shrubs. After several long seconds, Atlas backed down, though uneasily, tail straight, eyes locked on nothing the humans could see. Maya's voice softened. Maybe he remembers the scent from last night. Maybe the truck. Dylan rubbed the dog's neck gently. You remember everything, don't you, buddy? Atlas leaned into the touch, a moment of tenderness slipping through his alert posture. Then Gabriel straightened, stuffing the damaged body cam into his pack. We have enough to know this wasn't random. They used forest roads, planned the crash, moved something in a hurry, and expected to leave no witnesses. Dylan nodded grimly. And they think I'm dead. A long silence settled between the four of them, carrying the weight of a new direction. No longer survival, but pursuit. Gabriel glanced down the forest path leading toward Winslow. We follow the trucks. Maya folded her map carefully. Dylan tightened his coat. Atlas limped into position at his handler's side. Their trail was no longer just muddy ground and broken branches. It was a line pointing straight at the heart of the desert vultures, and the moment they stepped away from the crash site, all four felt it in their bones. The hunt had begun. The desert night had a strange stillness to it, the kind that pressed against the skin like warm breath. Heat clung to the air, even after sunset, and every gust of wind carried the dry, smoky scent of distant grass fires, a warning that wildfire season was coming early. Gabriel stopped at the crest of a hill, overlooking the abandoned farm on the outskirts of Albuquerque, New Mexico. What used to be a modest agricultural storage site now sagged beneath years of disrepair, rusted silos, cracked concrete, skeletal barns whose roofs bowed inward. A lonely windmill creaked like an old man muttering to ghosts. Dylan stood beside him, sweat beading at his temples despite the night air. His dark hair stuck slightly to his forehead, and the bruises along his jaw had deepened to violet trails. He moved carefully, keeping weight off his injured ribs, but his eyes were alert, the eyes of a man who had decided not to run anymore. "Vultures used this place for months," he said quietly. "We're late, but not too late." Behind them, Maya adjusted the straps of her canvas field bag. Her face, usually warm and expressive, was drawn tight with worry. The dry wind tugged stray strands from her braid, making her look even younger than 29, though her posture held the steadiness of someone who had learned to stay calm around wounded creatures, human or not. She checked Atlas's bandage one more time, fingers gentle on the German shepherd's hind leg. Atlas bore the inspection with a soft huff, amber eyes fixed on the farm below, ears twitching at every distant creak. Dylan finally reached into his pocket and brought out his cracked phone. "Marcus Doyle will come," he said. "He's the one man I trust in the Bureau." He typed the location and a brief summary of the evidence, but the reply was delayed. No signal, then a faint, fragmented ping. They knew help might not arrive in time. As they approached the farm's outer gate, Gabriel's instincts prickled. Years of war had carved a second heartbeat into him, one that thudded only when danger watched from unseen places. He scanned the dirt road, noticing tire tracks that were too fresh, boot prints that didn't belong. And then he saw it. A cigarette ember glowing behind a collapsed shed. Someone was already here, someone expecting them. "They found out I'm alive," Dylan whispered. His throat tightened. "They're hunting us." Gabriel said nothing. He simply motioned for the group to fall back, guiding them behind a row of hay bales left to rot in the sun. His voice dropped to a low growl. "We fortify. We make them come to us." The farm became a battlefield in minutes. Gabriel strung fishing wire and old horse stall chains across blind corners. He wedged loose sheets of tin so that the slightest touch sent them clattering like alarms. He kicked aside dust to reveal hardpan ground, perfect places to force bottlenecks. Dylan loaded an old Sina pump-action shotgun Gabriel had kept above his cabin door. His movements were stiff, but determination steadied his hands. "Just like the academy," he muttered. Gabriel gave him a brief, approving nod. Maya took the role she fit into naturally: communications, observation, support. She kept her radio pressed to her ear, hoping for Marcus Doyle's voice to break through the static. Her other hand never strayed far from Atlas's collar, grounding herself in the presence of a creature she trusted more than any weapon. Then the first ripple of danger broke. Footsteps, too many, too fast, crunched over the dry earth. Shadows fanned out behind the barns. The desert vultures were not here to scout. They were here to erase. A figure approached the west wall, moving slowly, almost casually. The man was tall, wiry, his silhouette sharp under the starlit sky. He carried a red plastic gas can, sloshing as he walked. He tilted his head, revealing a face lit by the faint moon, pocked skin, narrow eyes, and a mouth twisted into a permanent sneer. He wore a cheap leather jacket with a sun-bleached vulture emblem stitched on the sleeve. "Arson scout," Dylan whispered. "They're planning to burn us out." Before Gabriel could react, Atlas stiffened. The dog's muscles bunched like coiled wire, his breath hitched in one sharp burst. Then, silent at first, then rising into a fierce bark, Atlas lunged from behind the hay bales. His sudden charge startled the arsonist, who stumbled backward, tripping directly into a tripline Gabriel had set minutes earlier. Metal cans clattered in a thunderous chain, echoing across the empty farm. The man hit the ground hard, gas can flipping from his grip. Gabriel was on him immediately, one knee to the man's chest, elbow pinning his throat. The arsonist thrashed, spitting curses, but Gabriel's grip only tightened. The Marine in him surfaced, calm, efficient, immovable. "You're going to talk," Gabriel said, "or you're going to sleep." Dylan covered them with the shotgun while Maya dragged the gas can out of reach. Atlas circled the captured man, growling low, protective yet controlled, as if daring anyone else to take one more step toward Dylan or Gabriel. His eyes gleamed with purpose, with loyalty, with something wild and ancient that no criminal threat could extinguish. More vultures shouted in the distance. Boots hammered the dirt, but for a brief, crucial moment, they had leverage. A captured scout, an advantage, a spark of hope. Under the vast southwestern sky, where real vultures circled looking for death, a battered German shepherd had chosen the opposite. He had chosen to protect life, and that choice would change the night. Morning over Phoenix arrived muted and heavy, the sun struggling through a haze of industrial smoke that clung to the skyline like a veil. The air was dry, tense, almost metallic, the kind of heat that pressed against lungs and made every breath feel like work. This was not the cold of Flagstaff nor the storm of the forest nights. This was a different battlefield entirely. Gabriel stood beside the convoy of black FBI SUVs parked behind an abandoned loading dock on the city's outskirts. His shoulders seemed broader under the desert sun, his salt and pepper hair tucked beneath a tactical cap. There was no fear in his expression, only focus. The look of a man who had spent half his life stepping into danger so others could step out. Dylan adjusted the borrowed tactical vest clipped over his chest. His ribs were still wrapped tightly beneath the fabric, but his movements were impatient, restless. He had shaved for the first time in days, revealing a sharp jawline and a faint scar near his chin. A memento from one of his earliest cases in Flagstaff, back when he had still believed every cop played by the rules. Now, standing on the brink of the final confrontation, he felt something like purpose returning to his bones. Maya arrived last, stepping lightly from one of the SUVs. She wore a Kevlar vest over her trail jacket, her long chestnut hair braided tight against the Arizona wind. Her features were soft but determined, the steady fire of someone who had spent years patching up injured creatures, yet had never before stood at the edge of a federal raid. In her bag she carried field medicine, extra radios, and a small folded blueprint, the design for the rescue center she dreamed of building, a place for both injured animals and homeless kids. Atlas waited beside an FBI veterinary officer who knelt to check the bandages one last time. The German shepherd's sable coat glinted in the morning light, the fur around his hind leg trimmed and treated, his muscles tense beneath the harness. He wore a new collar-mounted camera, its lens gleaming like a tiny eye of steel. Despite everything he had endured, Atlas stood tall, ears sharp, gaze steady, a warrior's posture, a guardian's heart. Special Agent Marcus Doyle approached them from the front of the convoy. He was a tall black man in his mid-40s, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that held a calm intensity. His tactical vest fit securely over a charcoal gray shirt, and his hands moved with quiet confidence as he reviewed the operation plan. Years in federal law enforcement had carved patience into him, but also vigilance. He had once watched a partner fall because someone trusted the wrong person. He was determined not to repeat that mistake. "Warehouse perimeter confirmed," Doyle said, handing Gabriel a thermal scan. Heat signatures inside, multiple moving, likely guards, handlers, maybe even the kids. That last word hit Dylan harder than a bullet. Homeless teens, he muttered. They drag them into this. Doyle nodded grimly. They use them as couriers, bags on their backs, disposable. Maya's hands curled into fists. No kid is disposable. A faint crackle of radio static cut through the air. Team Bravo, ready. Team Delta in position. Snipers perched on the north scaffolding. Doyle raised his hand. Move. The raid unfolded with swift precision. Agents surged toward the loading bay, breaching the rusted doors with a deafening blast. Inside, rows of crates towered like artificial canyons, the floor a maze of shadows and dim lights. Atlas slipped into the chaos with startling fluidity, weaving between agents guided by instinct and training. The live feed from his collar displayed a dog's eye view of danger. The crates, the scattered tools, the frantic feet of fleeing criminals. A scream cut through the warehouse. A boy, no older than 13, was shoved forward by a man with a jagged beard and dead, wild eyes. The boy's backpack sagged under the weight of illegal cargo. The man yanked the kid closer, pressing a pistol to the boy's neck. "Back off," he roared. "He goes down with me." Dylan froze, gun trained, breath tight. The scene mirrored too many nights on patrol, too many victims he had arrived too late to save. Atlas did not freeze. He sprang. His leap carried him across a stack of crates, claws scraping metal, body stretching like a shot arrow. In one perfect motion, he latched onto the man's forearm. The gun clattered to the concrete, and the boy stumbled free, gasping. Agents swarmed in, handcuffs clicked shut. The child was escorted to safety. Atlas held position until Dylan called him off, voice steady but thick with emotion. "Good boy. That's my good boy." At the far end of the warehouse, another arrest unfolded, and Dylan felt his stomach turn cold. Lieutenant Harris Rowan, his former superior in Flagstaff, stood in cuffs between two federal agents. Rowan's blonde hair was slicked back as usual, but his face, once smooth with false confidence, now twisted with defeat. He didn't look at Dylan. Couldn't. His betrayal had been exposed. His career shattered. The Desert Vulture's leader fell next, dragged out from a fortified office, swearing vengeance until a baton silenced him. The operation ended as the sun climbed higher, burning away the haze and casting sharp light over the captured criminals. Phoenix exhaled. The fight was over. A week later, back in Flagstaff, the ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Dylan, wearing a crisp uniform, stood before the department as his badge was returned, but his eyes drifted only toward Atlas, now wearing a polished silver canine medal engraved with courage, loyalty, grace. Gabriel watched from the back, arms folded, a faint smile beneath his rugged features. Maya stood beside him, holding her blueprint. The rescue center she would build with new funding, a place of safety born from nights of danger. And later, on a hill overlooking the San Francisco peaks, the four of them stood together, a former Marine, a redeemed officer, a young woman with a healer's heart, and a dog who had refused to let darkness win. They did not speak. They did not need to. The wind carried the meaning for them. Sometimes God does not send thunder, fire, or lightning. Sometimes he sends a German shepherd who nudges your hand, growls when danger nears, or simply stays beside you long enough for hope to return. And under the Arizona sunset, they knew one truth. They had never fought alone. In the quiet glow of dawn, when the sky shifted from deep indigo to soft gold, it was impossible not to feel the presence of something greater watching over them. The colors of the morning, those gentle streaks of amber, rose, and pale blue, felt like the brushstrokes of God himself, reminding them that even after the darkest night, light always returns. Gabriel, Dylan, Maya, and Atlas stood atop the ridge, not because they were the strongest or the luckiest, but because grace had found them. Because in the moment when fear almost won, God sent courage. When danger closed in, he sent a loyal dog with a spark of divine instinct. And when hearts began to doubt, he painted the sky with soft colors that whispered, "You are not alone." In our everyday lives, we don't always face cartels, gunfire, or burning warehouses, but we do face fear. We do face loneliness. We do face moments when the world grows heavy and we can't see the path ahead. And in those moments, God often sends miracles in the simplest forms: a friend's voice, a stranger's kindness, a beam of morning light through the window, or even the quiet loyalty of a dog who refuses to leave our side. So if this story touched your heart, let its colors stay with you: the red of courage, the gold of hope, the white of grace, and the deep blue of a faith that holds steady even in the storm. May these colors follow you into tomorrow, reminding you that God is still painting miracles into your life. If this story brought you strength today, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment about where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so these stories can continue to shine light into dark places. And as you go, may the Lord bless you, protect you, and place His hand over your home and your loved ones. Comment Amen if you believe God can still send miracles, sometimes in the form of a loyal heart and 4 faithful paws.